Cristina stood in her new, sparsely furnished studio as she worked hard to rebuild her career as a sculptress. The echoes of her chisel against marble were the only company she had in Dredford. She had uprooted her life in Brazil to be with her husband Julio, as he took on a demanding job offshore, building an oil platform. The holidays had come and gone, each one spent alone, her husband's absence a heavy presence in this unfamiliar metropolis. The distance and loneliness weighed heavily on Cristina, but her art provided a much-needed solace. Julio's accident had been a harsh blow. It cost him the movement of one leg, and their fight about him returning to work lingered in her mind for a long time. He had promised it would be over soon, and they could leave Dredford behind and return home. But until then, she was alone, sculpting the hours away, the cold of the studio sinking into her bones. The strong smell of her working materials were ever present. The statue was a depiction of an ancient figure with mysterious and captivating features, a silent sentinel that seemed to watch over her as she worked. Its face, though unfinished, already held a somber, almost melancholic expression. As she focused intently on the delicate details of the statue's eyes, she felt a sudden, sharp pain in her chest. She paused, her breath hitching. Before she could process what was happening, a violent cough racked her body, and she doubled over, her hand instinctively covering her mouth. When she pulled her hand away, it was smeared with blood. Her eyes widened in shock and horror. She looked up at the statue, and her breath caught in her throat. The blood she had coughed up had splattered across the statue's face, giving it the eerie appearance of weeping blood. The crimson streaks ran down the clay cheeks, accentuating the sorrowful expression she had painstakingly crafted. Cristina stared at the statue, her mind reeling, a vivid reminder of her mortality. She reached out with a trembling hand to touch the blood on the statue's face, and her fingers smeared it further. But it was of no use. The image of the blood-streaked face was seared into her consciousness. The diagnosis came suddenly: cancer, aggressive. She tried to reach Julio, but the offshore world swallowed him entirely. She was admitted to the hospital, each day a struggle. Her prospects were grim. When Julio finally arrived, guilt etched deep into his features, and they spent precious moments together. She noticed the weight of his guilt, his presence a bittersweet comfort. Miraculously, she felt better the next day. The doctors were astounded. Julio and Cristina spent the entire day together, her energy boundless. Night fell, and as if a cruel joke, her condition deteriorated rapidly, plunging her into unconsciousness. When she awoke the following day, she felt well again. The doctors were bewildered. Her cancer had inexplicably vanished. They kept her under observation. Their optimism was infectious. Julio, however, disappeared, leaving no word behind. Days passed, and Cristina noticed strange changes. She felt tireless, her senses heightened. She could hear the whispers from other rooms, the rhythmic beating of hearts, the scent of blood permeating the air. Her strength seemed unnatural. She shattered a cup with a mere grip. She left deep imprints on a metal tray. Fear crept in. Was she going mad? As the doctors prepared to discharge her, she looked forward to returning home, eager to reclaim her life and work. But one night, as she stood on the cusp of freedom, strange figures entered her room. Darkness enveloped her. In the shadows of Dredford, Cristina's story was just beginning. She slowly opened her eyes, blinking against the dim light filtering through gaps in the ceiling. It was made of rusty metal sheets. She sat up, still feeling the unusual strength coursing through her body. She looked around, and she seemed to be at a junkyard. Her senses reached farther than before. There was someone else with her inside the room, a huge man, maybe the tallest she had ever seen. He stood a few feet away, watching her with an inscrutable expression.
Where am I? What happened?
The man approached her calmly. Somehow she felt he was not a threat to her. Was something altering her thoughts?
We are in a junkyard, Cristina. My allies and I brought you here after we took you from the hospital.
Took me? Who are you?
My name is Ivan, but among the Nosferatu I am simply known as the Preacher.
He pulled a chair and sat near Cristina. Her emotions were evident in the way she tensed as he neared. She concentrated her heightened feelings and noticed the man did not have a heartbeat.
Rest assured, I mean you no harm. I brought you here to tell you about a bargain your husband has pledged in his name and yours.
Julio, where is he?
You are going to meet him again soon enough. You had cancer, Cristina. You were at death's door and suddenly you recovered by a miracle. Not only that, I know you feel different, healthier, sharper, stronger.
Christina's interest was piqued. How did he know that? Instead of asking another question, she resolutely waited for his answers.
Your husband earned your current state of good health by selling himself into the service of a family of Nosferatu, a family of vampires. And without knowing any better, he also sold you.
Vampires, please.
Ivan allowed his countenance to hint at how terrible a truly unshackled vampire could be. The woman's words died in her throat.
You might not believe it, but deep inside you know it is true.
He approached her, and his presence made her coil. Something about him was alluring and dangerous. He fixed a lock of her hair, and her eyes closed in terror. Something about him made her skin crawl.
With but a word I could make you commit terrible sins, and with a bite I could drain the life of you to sustain my own.
She opened her eyes, and his eyes were luminous red, and his mouth bore a pair of fangs that awoke a primal fear inside her. She scattered to the other side of the bed, creating distance between them.
I could go on demonstrating it to you in more vulgar ways, but our time is limited, and I do not wish to insult your intelligence. I believe the message is clear. You yourself have proof of what I say within you. People don't beat cancer in an afternoon and develop gifts of the blood from their deathbed, Cristina.
The woman took a few moments to choose her next words carefully.
Who are you truly? Why are you here talking to me?
As I said before, your husband has bargained his service to a family of Nosferatu, House Ashkari. This family serves a court of vampires that rules over Dreadfort from the shadows. I am an enemy of this court and the house he serves, Cristina. I am part of the Tower, a faction that opposes those who turned your husband. If I had my way, they would be no more, unless they stop acting as instruments of the corruption that curses this city.
Vampires. It is so hard to believe.
Is it though, Cristina? Why do mortals recoil from the dark? Why are they afraid to look under their beds? Because deep inside their souls, they know we and other creatures stalk them.
Why would they need him? Or me, for that matter?
Ivan's eyes narrowed, but his body did not move. No breathing, no heart palpitation. He looked like a stoic statue glaring at her.
Because Giulio is valuable to them, and they knew using you would bind him to their cause. They needed leverage, and you were the perfect bargain.
And how can they cure me when no doctor could?
Many of our gifts can be considered ungodly, but suffice to say, there are ways that one might consider unnatural, if not evil. Why don't you ask Giulio's new family about it? You might also want to inquire about the risks this treatment imposes upon you. See for yourself if they are going to act honestly, or if they will keep you in the dark, to control you just as they control him.
You are saying he is some kind of slave to these vampires, and me as well?
You will be treated differently, but you'll still be their familiar, a slave bound by their rules and by their blood.
I won't be anyone's slave, rest assured, but why are you telling me this?
Ivan gave her an intense look, and his eyebrows furrowed.
Because I am giving you a choice. You can continue down the path Giulio has set for both of you, playing the role they've designed. Or you can take control of your own destiny, find true power, and perhaps even free Giulio from their grip.
And why should I trust you if you are one of them, as you said?
I am a Nosferatu, yes, but not one of them. They are my enemies. Nothing would please me more than working towards their ruin. I want to give you a chance to break free from their chains.
But Julio, he's my husband. I can't just abandon him.
I understand your loyalty, but Julia is no longer free. He's a slave to his new masters, bound by their laws. If you decline my offer, you'll never have control over your life again. But if you choose to fight, you can gain the power necessary to free him from the king's court.
I can't betray him. I cannot accept what you offer me.
Ivan handed Cristina a seal.
See for yourself what awaits you down this road. If you want to find the means to fight back, go to the E station of the subway. There you will see a homeless man with a black dog, begging for money with a metal mug. Instead of money, offer him this, and he will bring you to me.
Cristina took the seal. It was crimson red with the design of a tower engraved on it.
I won't be a slave, not to them, not to anyone, not even to you.
Good. Then I hope we'll see each other again.
Cristina watched as Ivan went away, clutching the seal tightly. She felt confused, but she was sure of one thing. She will not be a pawn in a game. She will fight for her freedom, and if possible, for Julio's. Soon after that, Cristina was rescued by Julio and a detective. She was brought to Dreadford's public library by them. Cristina slowly regained consciousness, her senses coming alive in the dim, musty air of the library. The heavy scent of old books and ancient wood filled her nostrils as she blinked her eyes open, the world coming into hazy focus. Beside her, she felt a familiar presence, and as her vision cleared, she saw Julio's worried yet relieved face. Without a word, they embraced tightly, the warmth of their connection piercing through the cold uncertainty that surrounded them.
Julio, what's happening? Where are we?
He held her close with his hand gently stroking her hair.
We are safe now, Cristina. I got help. You're safe here.
She pulled back slightly, searching his eyes for answers.
Who were those people? Why did they take me? What is going on?
Julio looked away with a pained expression.
I can't explain everything. There are laws and rules I can't break. But they want to hurt us, Cristina. Hurt me, you, and all the vampires who help us.
Cristina's eyes widened.
Vampires? Julio, I need to know more. What's happening to me? Why can't we go home?
He sighed heavily, the sound filled with resignation.
It is not safe to return home. We could be targeted again. And right now, the most important thing is to make sure you are 100% okay.
Cristina's frustration bubbled to the surface.
But I don't understand. Who are these vampires? What do they want with us? You gave blood for me to drink?
I didn't know it was blood. I made a deal so they would help you get better. I myself still barely understand their world.
How could you make a deal you didn't understand? We need to take a step back and think clearly about everything.
Julio gently took her hands.
You've seen too much, Cristina. Know too much. The only place you're safe is here, in the library. This place is under the protection of House Ashkari. The court can't enforce their punishments against you here. If they knew about you, they'd either erase your memories, bind you under sanguine fealty, or even worse.
Cristina's mind raced.
So this means we have to stay here forever?
Just for now. Until it's safe, until we can find a way to protect you.
I want our privacy, our own space. But if this is the only way to stay safe...
It is. We can be attacked again if we leave.
Cristina nodded slowly. The reality of their situation settled heavily on her shoulders.
All right, Julio, we'll stay. But promise me we'll find a way out of this together.
He embraced her again, his voice firm with resolve.
I promise. We'll get through this. Together.
After their talk, Cristina was attended by familiars, those bound to serve the vampires. She was led down winding staircases to a subterranean room within the library. The walls were lined with ancient tomes and the air was cool, almost damp. The familiars were courteous yet detached, their eyes reflecting lives of quiet servitude. One of the familiars told her to let them know if she needed anything, with a voice devoid of emotion. Cristina couldn't help but notice the bizarre nature of her surroundings and the peculiar demeanor of the familiars. There was an eerie stillness to the place, a sense of age and secrecy. Despite her unease, she cooperated, remembering Julio's plea for her to stay calm and comply. The next day, Cristina experienced a strange realization. As the sun reached high noon, Julio was asleep as if in a death-like slumber. She approached him with her heart pounding. His skin was cold, and his body was utterly still, as though he were truly dead. The sight chilled her to the bone. She could only imagine if this was the same to the other vampires. The familiars brought her any belongings she wished, and were always ready if she needed anything. As she roamed the library day after day, Cristina observed their lives. They moved about, performing their duties with practiced precision. She could not remove from her mind the thought that they lived as servants. Their existence was bound to their vampiric masters. She noticed how differently she was treated compared to them. While the familiars were largely ignored, she received a special status, an unspoken recognition of her unique situation. Julio spent as much time with Cristina as he could, trying to inject a sense of normalcy into their strange new life. Yet, it was clear to Cristina that things were different now. Julio's presence, though comforting, lacked the warmth and vitality it once had. Some nights, he would leave without explanation, disappearing into the shadows of the library or the outside world. She, on the other hand, found herself confined within the library walls. She noticed a familiar who always seemed to be watching her, ensuring she never left the premises. The other vampires went about their business and paid her no mind. She made a point to stay out of their way. One night, Cristina found herself wandering the halls of the library, drawn by the sounds of clashing metal and grunts of exertion. She followed the noise to a dimly lit room where Julio and one of the vampires, Sebastian, were engaged in a fierce duel. They moved with fluid grace, their swords flashing under the flickering lights. Julio, typically a man of science, seemed oddly at home in this brutal dance. Sebastian was relentlessly pushing Julio to his limits. Their swords clashed and whirled in a deadly ballet, each strike met with a precise parry. Cristina watched, transfixed, as Sebastian suddenly drove his blade into Julio's chest. She gasped, horrified, her heart pounding in her chest. Blood seeped from the wound, and for a moment, she thought she had witnessed her husband's death. But the vampires around her remained unfazed. Julio, despite the impalement, stood firm. With a grimace, he withdrew the sword, the wound already beginning to close. Cristina realized with a shock that what would be a mortal injury to a human was merely a temporary inconvenience to a vampire. As Julio continued to train, Cristina's mind reeled. This display of violence and resilience drove home the stark reality that the world of vampires was far more brutal and unforgiving than she had ever imagined. It was a place where strength and survival were intertwined, and even those like Julio, who cherished knowledge and reason, had to be adept in the art of combat. Next night, driven by curiosity and concern, Cristina went looking for Julio. She knew he was studying inside a particular room deep within the library. As she approached, she saw a familiar standing guard outside the door. The familiar's expression was impassive. His eyes tracked her movements as she drew closer.
I need to see Julio.
The familiar shook his head.
Master Julio is busy. He cannot be disturbed.
Busy with what? I am his wife, and I need to talk to him.
Master Julio is studying. He has instructed that he is not to be disturbed under any circumstances.
Studying sorcery?
Cristina pressed, while she tried to peer past the familiar into the room beyond.
Yes, Master Julio is one of the masters. He requires complete focus.
Cristina felt a surge of anxiety. She hated the distance that had grown between them, the secrets that seemed to multiply with each passing day.
Please, I just want to see him.
I understand, but Master Julio's instructions are clear. He will come to you when he is finished.
Defeated, Cristina stepped back, her heart heavy.
All right, thank you.
As she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling of isolation that had settled over her. The library, with its hidden depths and ancient secrets, felt like a labyrinth she was destined to wander alone. Despite the peculiarities, Cristina remained composed, determined to understand this new reality. She would bide her time and seek answers to the mysteries that now defined her life. A couple of nights later, Candice approached Cristina while she was seated at a table engrossed in a book. The vampire moved with a fluid grace, and her presence commanded attention. She placed a wine glass filled with a dark, viscous liquid in front of Cristina. Cristina looked up, her brow furrowing in confusion.
What is this?
She eyed the glass warily. Candace's expression was impatient and her tone blunt.
It's your medicine. Normally it would be disguised, but you already know the nature of it. So there is no reason to waste time pretending it is anything else.
Christina's eyes widened as the realization dawned on her.
Is this vampire's blood?
Yes, it is.
Cristina recoiled slightly, shaking her head.
I have no intention of drinking this.
Candace's gaze hardened, and she leaned in closer, her voice low and serious.
If you don't drink it, your cancer will return and take your life.
Christina's resolve wavered for a moment, but she steeled herself, refusing to be swayed.
I hope it does. This is no way of living.
She said, hard as stone. Candace's eyes flashed with a mix of frustration and resignation.
One of us was destroyed to give you and Julio this opportunity. This is not something to take lightly.
Cristina stood up, her muscles tensing as she prepared to flee if Candace tried to force her. But Candace merely sighed and turned away.
It is your choice. You know the consequences of refusing it.
With that, Candace walked away, leaving the glass of blood untouched on the table. Cristina stared at it, her mind a whirlwind of fear and defiance. The choice was hers, but the weight of it felt almost too much to bear. She still refused the blood no matter how much Julio insisted. They fought over it. As the days passed, Cristina found herself lost in thought, reflecting on the gravity of her situation. One evening she sought out Julio for a serious conversation. She was determined to get answers. She found him in a quiet corner of the library, surrounded by an alchemical apparatus and books. He was working on something. Blood. It smelled like it.
Julio, we need to talk.
Her voice was firm as she approached him. He looked up, and his expression softened as he saw her.
Cristina, what's wrong?
She sat down beside him, her eyes searching his.
I need to understand what's going on. The things you're doing, the magic, the blood. I need to know the truth.
Julio sighed, running a hand through his hair.
I am trying to protect you, Cristina. Everything I did is for us.
But why do you need to be so secretive? What exactly are you doing when you leave me here alone? Where do you go?
Her voice trembled with a mix of frustration and desperation. Julio hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words.
I cannot tell you everything, Cristina. The King's Court has rules, secrets I must keep. But I promise, it's all to keep you safe.
Cristina leaned forward with pleading eyes.
Why do you insist I take that medicine? You know it's vampire blood. I know if I don't take it, my cancer will return. That vampire woman was clear on that. But taking it, it's not right, Julio. It's blood taken from someone. And I know there are side effects when you drink vampire blood.
Julio's expression grew serious.
I have learned how to handle those side effects.
He pointed to a flask containing blood that was part of the apparatus he was working on before she arrived. He took the flask and offered it to her.
It's my blood, and I am the one who prepared it. You just need to trust me.
Trust you? How many people have been bled dry so I can live? So you can perform your magic? How much harm has been done in the name of keeping us safe?
Julio left the flask over a table and reached out, taking her hands in his.
I've spoken to Van Arden. He's working to secure the right to blood for you. The situation is going to end soon. The council denied us, but an opportunity is approaching. A masquerade ball at winter solstice. We just have to hang tight until then.
A familiar rushed in with urgency in his eyes before Cristina could respond.
Master Julio, there's been an explosion. Daniel Reed was caught in it.
What? How?
He was attacked at his motel room. He is languid. Eloise is taking him to Volkos territory. She asked to tell you to go there immediately.
Julio stood up abruptly. His mind was clearly racing.
I need to handle this, Cristina. I'm sorry. I need to go.
Cristina watched him go, feeling the weight of their conversation still heavy on her heart. She was left alone once again, with more questions than answers, the flask of blood still untouched on the table. Night after night, Cristina sat in her room, surrounded by books and papers, trying to lose herself in study. Ever since she had come to this place, her mind had been unable to focus on her work as a sculptress. One night, as she tried to concentrate, she heard screams and loud noises echoing through the library. Uneasiness settled over her, and she dropped her study materials, her heart pounding. She took a flashlight and went to find out what was happening. She heard voices nearby as soon as she stepped into the darkened library. The place felt even more ominous than usual, with shadows playing tricks on her eyes. She crept closer, straining to make out the conversation.
Let's be pragmatic. We cannot decide this question surrounded by hostiles. We need to call off the voting.
These hostiles are rebels and work for her. She is the problem. Let's solve it.
What is happening? Julio, are you all right? What is all this noise?
She stepped into the room, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The vampires turned to look at her, their eyes glowing unnaturally in the dim light. She could smell blood and see their inhuman features. To her, they all looked like monsters, even Julio. Cristina's heart raced as she recognized her husband among them. Julio's face was a mask of terror as he saw her. He moved towards her quickly, his voice urgent.
Cristina, you shouldn't be here.
Why is this place so dark? Who are all these people? I am hearing a loud noise coming from here. What is happening?
Julio pulled her into his arms protectively.
It wasn't anything,
I apologize. She's just a familiar working here in the library. Please, Julio, escort her back to her quarters and return here immediately.
Cristina felt a surge of anger at being called just a familiar. She resisted a little as Julio led her out of the room, but they left without anyone getting in their way. Back in her room, she was fuming.
I've had enough of this, Julio.
Julio tried to calm her, his voice soothing.
Cristina, please. It's for your own safety. Just try to rest.
It was right then that she finally understood. Her husband was lost to their games, to their world, and she was helpless to do anything about it. She was just a burden to him, to the vampires around him, even to the familiars that were tasked with helping her. He was a slave now, and if she did nothing about it, she would become one as well. She would fight this court, and for that she needed strength, whatever the cost might be, even if it was taking a road to hell. She laid down to sleep, but her mind was still racing. As soon as Julio left, she got up and went to the place where she had hidden the seal Ivan had given her. Her conversation with the preacher echoed in her mind. She took the seal and stared at it for long hours. In the end, she made her choice. No one would decide her fate for her. Cristina knew she had to flee the library. As she was prohibited from leaving due to the watchful eyes of a familiar, she needed a plan. She decided to make her move in the afternoon when the familiars were busiest handling mundane tasks and the vampires were asleep. Next morning, she approached one of the familiars who was always hovering nearby.
I haven't been able to sleep properly. Normal sleeping pills aren't working because, well, you know, I'm altered by the blood.
The familiar nodded sympathetically.
I understand. We have something stronger, crafted by the masters. It's common for familiars with insomnia. I'll get it for you.
A few minutes later, the familiar returned with a small vial of a powerful sedative. Cristina took it, thanking him profusely. She knew this was her chance. She studied for days the right moment and way to administer the sedative to the familiar who kept watch over her. When the time came for her plan to be launched, it was a simple matter. Within minutes, he was out cold. She quickly hid him in a storage closet, ensuring it would take hours for anyone to find him, maybe even until the next day. Once outside, she breathed a sigh of relief, the cool evening air filling her lungs. She made her way to the coordinates Ivan had given her. She was surprised she still remembered them so clearly. Cristina reached the E-station, scanning the area, until she spotted the homeless man with the black dog. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached him and offered the seal Ivan had given her. The man's eyes widened slightly as he recognized the seal. Without a word, he nodded and motioned for her to follow him. He led her through a series of dark, twisting corridors in the subway, finally arriving at a secluded platform. A train waited there, looking old and forgotten. The man gestured for her to board. Cristina hesitated for a moment, then steeled herself and stepped onto the train. The doors closed behind her with a hiss, and the train lurched into motion. In an underground chamber dimly lit by a reddish light, Ivan stood before a group of vampires.
We can't win against the court. We are outnumbered and often outmatched.
A bloodling vampire said.
Strength does not always come from numbers. It comes from understanding your true nature, embracing it fully. Each of you has the potential to surpass even the strongest of their ilk. But you must be willing to let go of your fear and embrace the darkness within. However, always remember the need for discipline. Recklessness will allow this darkness to devour you all.
A familiar approached the group of vampires.
Master, there is a woman here to see you. She is sure you would receive her. She had this with her.
Ivan let a smile escape as he took the seal in his hand.
Admit her.
The familiar looked surprised but bowed and rushed to follow his command.
Remember what I have taught you. Reflect on it. Our time will come, and when it does, we must be ready.
With these words, Ivan emptied the chamber of his students. Before Cristina arrived, he approached the huge mirror.
It worked, my lady. I doubted you. Pardon me for my lack of faith.
The mirror remained silent, its surface cold and reflective. Moments later, Cristina entered the chamber, her eyes filled with determination. She was caught by surprise by the huge pool of blood in the middle of the room, but tried her best to ignore it.
You were right. I am ready to take up your offer.
Ivan turned to face her, his expression inscrutable.
I am pleased to hear that, Cristina. You have made a wise decision. Now, you must know what it entails.
Cristina watched him intently, her resolve unshaken.
This will be the end of your mortal life, and you will be reborn into a new existence.
I understand, but the life I treasured once no longer exists. There is nothing to cling to, and I won't spend my remaining years as a slave.
Ivan approached her, his immense size towering over her, but she did not feel threatened. She held her breath as he reached out, tilting her head to the side.
This will hurt, but not for long.
Cristina closed her eyes and Ivan sank his fangs on her neck.